Hello everyone, in this video I will be discussing about the life and case of Joe Metheny. Now you may be wondering who is Joe Metheny, and Joe Metheny became a serial killer and also committed cannibalism, but we'll get more into that right now. So Joe Metheny was born March 2nd, 1953 in Maryland. He was one of 6 children and he described his younger life to be hard, explaining how his father was an alcoholic and his mother being neglectful towards him and his siblings. But that wasn't the case because in reality, Joe's mom was working hard since Joe's father had passed. She had to take care of 6 kids on her own, which is a lot, I would imagine. And since Joe's mom was actually working so that she can support herself and her family, she would pay people that she knew to take care of her kids. So when Joe turned 18, he decided to join the military, and he claimed to be stationed in Vietnam, but there is no records found that he was deployed there. But one thing we do know is that when Joe was in the military, he became heavily addicted to drugs, especially cocaine and heroin. As time went on serving in the military, Joe's time serving was finally done. But he didn't go back home, nor did he keep any contact with his family. It was because he was so hooked on drugs, and so he just became homeless. He ended up staying in a homeless camp in South Baltimore, which is where he also got his drugs. As time goes on, it is currently now the early 90s, and Joe becomes well known among the homeless community, and he even gets a job as a truck driver as well as a forklift driver. Joe of course ends up getting these jobs to at least support himself and to purchase more drugs. Joe ended up meeting a woman who was also an addict. They end up falling in love, getting married, and even having a kid. Since Joe has been working a lot, he was able to afford to have a roof over their head. He was able to buy a trailer home for his wife and child. Although something strange happened one night. One night in 1994, Joe returns home and finds all his furniture gone, as well as his wife and kid. So Joe just knows that his wife took the kid and home belongings and just ran away. In the period of 6 months, nobody knows what Joe was doing. We don't even know if he was searching for his wife and kid, or if he was just working the entire time. 6 months go by and still no sign of Joe's wife and kid. One day, Joe goes to get more drugs from local homeless. But then Joe overhears that from one of the dealers that his wife moved to the other side of town with some guy. Joe heard that she was working as a sex worker. While getting paid, she of course spent it all on drugs. Joe's kid was also taken because of the wife. The kid was taken from her for neglect and child abuse. Joe then finds out that she was living under a bridge as a sex worker, so he goes to go investigate. Joe stumbles upon these 2 homeless men and he asks them questions. Joe asks, "Have you seen my wife around here?" Both of the men say no. It is known among the homeless community that Joe lives around that when he is on drugs, he is always on edge and angry. So in anger, Joe walks away with the answers he hears, making up scenarios in his head that makes him only angrier. So, Joe grabs an axe not far from him, and he ends up murdering both of these homeless men, chopping them into pieces. Not long from then, Joe notices another sex worker. Joe then offers the sex worker drugs, luring her in under the bridge. Once again, Joe asks this woman, "Do you know anything about my wife, or have you seen her?" The sex worker says no. This leaves Joe very angry. Joe ends up beating her, murdering her, as well as sexually assaulting. Once again, Joe ends up hearing another person come in the distance. He panics and puts the corpse of the sex worker in a bush. Once again, it's another sex worker. Joe ends up instantly killing them without asking any questions. Joe then notices a fisherman in the distance. He is very unsure and cautious if that fisherman has seen anything of what just happened. What Joe does is he grabs a steel pipe and beat the fisherman in the head repeatedly, killing him. At this point, Joe starts hiding the bodies. Joe then ended up taking one of the dead homeless men, putting them on the mattress, and dismembering their head, and buried them. He then ties cement bricks on 2 of the bodies trying to drown them in the lake, and he ended up hiding a body in a bush. At this point, Joe spent too much time in this one spot, so he just left. 2.5 weeks go by and Joe ended up being linked to these murders. He was arrested with these murders, but only of the 2 homeless men, because police didn't find the other bodies at this time, unfortunately. Joe ended up spending a 1.5 years waiting for trial. Once his trial finally began, he ended up being acquitted due to lack of evidence. Joe was then set free. Basically what Joe would do is he would go back to his trailer home and he would lure in sex workers with drugs. Once Joe lured in the sex workers, he would instantly close the door and he would either beat them, sexually assault them, strangle them, or just instantly dismember them. Joe would usually cut off all the body fat and muscles, and he would then put the meat of the bodies into Tupperware bowls and put them in the freezer. With the pieces that Joe did not like, he would bury them in shallow graves. Joe said himself that there was roughly about 10 murders, all involving sex workers. As Joe was working as a truck driver, he then wanted to make a little extra money. Joe then had the idea of opening a little roadside burger bar, and basically what Joe would serve was pork and beef burgers. And from what we know is that Joe was actually having a successful stand. People really enjoyed them from what they said. It was good. No negative feedback at all. But what the customers did not know is that by pork and beef, yes, there was pork and beef, but they did not know that Joe mixed in the human meat of his victims in these pork and beef hamburgers. So in reality, these people that were eating from his burger stand were becoming human hiding spots for Joe's victims. And not to mention, Joe has been keeping up this burger stand for weeks, and people have just been eating this without even realizing. But one day, Joe ends up running out of this special meat, so he plans on capturing another sex worker. So Joe then finds, once again, another sex worker. He then lures her into the trailer and quickly shuts the door. He instantly starts beating her in the head, and the victim falls. Joe, thinking she is knocked out, he turns around for a split second, and the victim quickly opens the door and starts running. Although Joe was careless, because around Joe's home was an 8-inch barbed wire fence. But what the woman did was that she climbed these wood pallets and hopped over these barbed wire fences. The next thing the woman did was that once she was running down the road as fast as she possibly can, she then flags down a truck driver and tells this truck driver everything that just happened. And so what they do is they both go to the gas station, and then they make a phone call to the police. Once Joe seen the woman hop over the fence, he knew it was game over. Joe then sat there in front of his home waiting for the cops to come, and which they did. The police came and arrested Joe in 1996. He was now in jail, and he gave the police a genuine confession. He told them everything. All the bodies he killed, all the bodies he hid, the human meat, everything. Joe was given a death sentence, but it was overturned in the 2000s and got 2 life sentences. In August of 2017, Joe was found dead in his prison cell, dying at the age of 62. But I guess you can say that was the end of the Joe Metheny case.